You don't own your own life, my mother said, calm as a prayer, the day the bank froze every dollar I had. She didn't yell it, she didn't threaten me. She said it like a fact, like she was telling me the weather. I was 68 years old, sitting at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at my phone while the automated voice kept repeating, "Your account is currently under review." I laughed at first, that dry old person laugh you do when something is too stupid to be real. I'd paid my bills on time my whole life. I'd worked 40 years without taking a handout. I didn't gamble, I didn't do anything wild. Hell, the wildest thing I'd done that year was buy name-brand cereal. So when the bank told me my accounts were frozen due to trust-related activity, I thought they had the wrong woman. Then my mother called. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't say my name. She just sighed and said, "I was hoping it wouldn't happen like this." That's when she reminded me of the trust fund, the one she'd mentioned exactly twice in my life. Once when I was 21, "Just paperwork, honey, tax stuff." And once when my father died, "Your dad wanted to make sure you'd be safe someday." I never saw the papers, never signed anything that I remembered. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. Over the next week, letters started coming. Red envelopes, legal language, words like default, liability, cosigner. My credit score dropped so fast it felt personal. A mortgage I'd never taken out, investments I'd never approved, a rental property in a state I'd never even visited. Every single one of them had my name on it. When I confronted my mother and my uncle, her older brother, they sat me down like I was 12 again, told me to relax, told me I was confused, told me stress does funny things to women my age. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money. They'd already started telling people I was slipping, that I couldn't manage finances anymore, that they were helping. Neighbors stopped calling. A cousin asked, real gentle, if I was doing okay mentally. I went home that night and pulled out every old box I had, tax returns, death certificates, yellowed folders that smelled like dust and time. And buried under my father's insurance paperwork, I found something that made my hands shake. An amendment to the trust, dated 5 years earlier, signed while I was recovering from surgery. I hadn't been broke before the trust woke up, but I was about to learn just how carefully they'd planned for me to be helpless. And that was the moment I understood. This trust wasn't created to protect my future. It was created to take it from me. If I was really losing my mind like they claimed, why did every document benefit them and only activate when I was weakest?
The first thing I learned about being labeled unstable is how fast people stop listening to you. I walked into the bank with a folder so thick it barely closed. Statements, notices, copies of signatures that looked like mine but weren't. I spoke slow, clear, calm, like a woman trying not to give anyone an excuse. The young guy behind the desk nodded a lot, typed a little, then leaned back and said, "Ma'am, according to the trust administrator, you're not authorized to make decisions right now." Not anymore. Right now. That's when it clicked. This wasn't sudden. This was staged. I went home and called the lawyer whose name was buried in the trust documents. He didn't answer. His assistant did. She already knew who I was. That scared me more than if she hadn't. She said, "Your family expressed concerns about your capacity a while ago." A while ago turned out to be right after my surgery, the one where I was under anesthesia, the one where my mother helped handle my paperwork. According to the timeline, that's when the trust was quietly revised. New clauses, new language, a fallback provision that said if I showed financial mismanagement or cognitive decline, control would transfer automatically to my mother. They didn't need a doctor's note, they didn't need a court order. All they needed was a mess, and they made one using my name. I started tracing the money, Every loan led back to a property my uncle managed. Every investment fed into a company my cousin sat on. Risky deals, short-term flips, stuff that could tank fast. And when it did, guess whose credit took the hit? Mine. They weren't stealing from me, they were using me as insulation. The real punch came when I found the origin of the trust money. It wasn't some smart savings plan, it was my father's death settlement. The payout everyone said was handled, the money that was supposed to help me heal after he was gone. They'd wrapped my grief into a legal cage and called it love. When I confronted my mother again, she didn't deny it. She just looked tired and said, "Families do what they have to do." That night, I realized something colder than anger. If I fought for the money, I'd lose. But if I fought for my name, for my credibility, for proof that I was never incompetent, they couldn't touch me. So I stopped calling, stopped arguing, started documenting. I requested hospital records, pulled email metadata, compared signature gates to medical logs, built a timeline so clean it couldn't be dismissed as confusion. They thought I was a fragile old woman clinging to money. They didn't realize I was preparing to burn the entire structure down. What they didn't know was that one clause they added, the one meant to silence me, was the exact thing that would expose them all.
"You really think I won't see this coming?" I muttered to myself as I spread every single file across my dining table. Hospital records, emails, scanned signatures, trust amendments. It was all here. Every accidental revision, every silent transfer, every risky investment disguised as a family favor. I traced every transaction, every loop of money, every misleading note that tied me to the fiasco. It wasn't just money, it was my identity. They'd built a shadow life in my name, under my social security, under my credibility, and they'd done it while smiling at me over holiday dinners. I stared at a PDF with a date stamp, March 17th, last year. That was the day my mother, with her polite smile, had signed off on a high-risk investment. According to the trust amendments, that decision was made in my name. My heart sank, then tightened. Every misstep they'd created, they'd expected me to stumble, to look incompetent, to justify their control. I leaned back in my chair. I was furious. But more than that, I was calculating. This wasn't about revenge, it was about exposing the truth, legally and publicly, without letting them manipulate the narrative. I needed to hit them where it hurt: credibility, identity, control. Damien, of course, was already 3 steps ahead. He'd hacked the metadata trails for every document. Each forged signature had a digital fingerprint. Every email redirect, every P.O. box, every fraudulent application could be traced back to the family's hands. "They built a house of cards," he said, tapping on the keyboard, "and they didn't realize they left the foundation exposed." I mapped everything chronologically: hospital stay, trust amendments, suspicious property purchases, and the slow drain on my credit. Each step told the same story: a premeditated attempt to make me fail, a psychological play to brand me incapable. Then came the twist I hadn't fully anticipated: the psychological angle. My mother didn't just want the money, she wanted proof I was unstable. If she could make me look crazy in court, she'd not only gain control of the trust, she'd delegitimize every argument I'd make. Every lawyer, every judge, every bank would doubt me. They weren't just stealing my finances, they were trying to erase my voice, my authority, my autonomy. That night, I stopped being the cautious, quiet daughter. I became something sharper. I called my lawyer. I set up forensic analysis. I drafted affidavits. I logged every deceptive email. And I realized the most dangerous part of their plan? They assumed I'd react emotionally, that I'd cry, that I'd beg, that I'd submit. But I didn't, because I understood something they didn't. The very trust they used to cage me was also the one thing that could free me. Tomorrow, I confront them, not with anger, not with negotiation, but with proof so undeniable it will strip away their control forever. "I'm not here to get the money back," I told the judge, my voice steady. My hands folded like I'd practiced. I'm here to get my name back. You could feel the room shift when I said that. My mother looked confused. My uncle looked annoyed. They were ready for tears, ready for an old woman begging to be saved from herself. What they weren't ready for was clarity. My lawyer laid it all out, slow, clean, impossible to spin. The surgery dates, the anesthesia records, the trust amendments filed while I was medically incapacitated, the metadata showing who uploaded the documents, the paper trail connecting every bad investment to my uncle's companies, the fallback clause that magically activated only after my credit was destroyed. It wasn't one big crime. It was 1,000 small, quiet choices stacked on top of each other until my life collapsed. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He asked one question that cracked everything open. Why was her competency only questioned after these transactions failed? No one answered. My mother finally spoke. She said she was just trying to manage things, said she was scared I'd mess it up, said she didn't mean for it to go this far. That's when I understood something I wish I'd learned decades earlier. Intent doesn't matter when the damage is real. The court ordered an independent forensic audit. That was the end of their control. The trust was suspended, then dissolved, then referred for investigation, not because I demanded punishment, but because the evidence left no other option. A week later, I changed my name, not out of shame, out of freedom. I closed every account tied to the trust, opened new ones in my own name, with my own signature, on my own terms. I moved, quietly, somewhere no one knew me as the woman who lost it, but simply as a woman who lived. My mother tried to call once. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to explain. Some relationships don't end with screaming. They end with understanding and silence. Now, when people ask why I tell this story, I smile a little. I tell them because control doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes with paperwork, with help, with family. They thought the trust would bind me forever, but standing there, an old woman finally speaking without fear, I realized the truth. I was never their asset. I was never their liability, and I sure as hell was never their property. If a piece of paper can erase a life, imagine what happens when the truth finally signs its name.